Yes, I had it, my brother had it. And we almost died, but we recovered. Well, my dad had a country store. And I know I was about 5 years old. Well, I went to school when I was 5 because my brother went to school. And I wanted to go with him. So my dad went down to the principal and asked the principal if I could come to school. And he said, she's not the right age yet, but she cries every time her brother goes to school. So he said, well, we'll try her. So he tried having me there, and I passed everything. So I was 5 years old instead of 6 when I started to school.
That's
After the blizzard, I mean, if we could get to school, we went. We didn't stay home. I walked from school, but not to school. My dad took us to school, but we didn't walk home every day. Well, I liked it from the first math I took. Adding and subtracting and dividing and all that. And I liked it all the way up. I didn't like geometry very much because you had to figure out too many things. But I liked trig, and I pursued that more than any other. Like kerosene lamps and oil lamps. We had loads of those because we had them for every room when we were sitting in our house.
It was hard to do your homework.
Well, no, we put the lamp right. Oh, we got a rail lamp, one of those that had bright lights and little sacks that I don't know how to tell you how.
Oh.
They had little sacks.
They're gas.
Yeah, and you had to light those. Well, that made a bright light because people used to come and sit, you know, and talk and sit around the stove and spit their amber juice in the pot, you know, that they had ashes in. But it was a regular old country store.
And did you have a telephone?
Yes, we did. But it was one of those crank kind. I've still got it, the frame part, but it doesn't work.
Did you have a telephone before you got electricity?
Oh, my uncle was a telephone man, and he had the telephone in the house before we bought it. So we always had a telephone.
Wow.
Either in the store or in the house.
And was it a place where people would come to use the telephone? It was kind of like a payphone.
Well, they did, but we had it in our house, so we didn't let everybody come in their house. Only emergencies, you know.
Right.
And it was, well, I forget how much they paid per month for it. Mm-hmm. But there were so many people along the way that had these telephones, and one could listen in on the other's conversation. Most people knew everybody's business. So it wasn't any secrets going on. It went right by our house. From the time I didn't know any time that it wasn't going by my house. See, my dad had a country store and a post office. So they rode by there every day and threw this mail sack out. And, they had a stand that had a pipe up like that. And Dad would hang the mail sack on it. And as they went by, they would grab the mail sack off of that thing, that pipe, and then throw the other mail bag down on the platform.
But the train didn't stop at your store?
Not unless there was a passenger or something. There was a flag up or something that I forget now exactly how they knew. But if somebody was, because most people, that's the only transportation they had. Our family had a car, but
Did you drive it?
I did when I become 19. They wouldn't let you drive until, you were 18, I think it was. But I didn't drive very far because it was my dad's car. So my brother drove it and I drove it, and everybody in the family that could drive drove it. In one car, so you know how that would be.
Mm-hmm. Do you remember what the make and model was?
Yeah, it was a 36 Dodge, and it was a real pretty light blue. My dad let me go with them when they picked it out, so we picked the light blue one. And my brothers and the whole family drove it because my dad didn't drive one of the gear shift cars. He had a Model T, and he didn't want to learn. So he let my brother and me and all of us. So we would take him in the Dodge when he wanted to go somewhere. So I decided I'd save my money. I was going to the bank and I was going to get it out and buy myself a car. Mm-hmm. Well, my brother said, Phil, if you'll go in partnership with me, we can get a good car. Mm. I did, but that was a mistake. Because he was dating and had the car most of the time. I didn't get it very much. Well, my aunt, my dad's sister, was named Philippa. And she married a guy by the name of Martin. They lived in the house that I'm living in now. But they had a little baby. It was 2 years old. And they were sitting in the same house I'm in now. I was in. And a storm came up. And the railroad wasn't too far away. So the railroad men that knew the baby, knew the family, came in to see the baby. While they were there, lightning struck, killed her and the baby, but left all the other guys sitting around. Didn't even touch them at all, but just those two. So that's how I got my name. I was the oldest girl, and my aunt and uncle didn't have any children. So every chance I got, I went up and visited them. Now my uncle had a taxi service. He owned a business, and he had drivers that took the taxis out. And he had a clientele of very, I guess you'd say, well-off people that always got his cabs to take them from the train to their homes or wherever. But he had that for right many years. Then one night he worked a little bit late, and these two men came in and wanted him to take them up near Somerset. Well, he was the only one there. The other guy had gone out on a trip. So they said, well, we need to go right now. So my uncle said, well, I'll just have to take you then. And when he got out around Somerset, they hit him over the head and knocked him out and threw him in the ditch. and one of his drivers was off, and he happened to walk by and heard somebody moaning, and he looked, and it was my uncle that he worked for. So he got the doctors and the nurses and got everybody and took him home. They didn't take him to the hospital because they thought he was going to die. So they took him home. Then Dr. Scott, who was our family doctor that lived here in Orange, he came down and looked at him and treated him the best he could. But he survived. But he had a big dent in his head that they actually thought he was dead. And he lived to be 88 years old. I think it was 88, something like that. But he always had that dent in his head because it crushed the skull. I went up there. I stayed from June until December. The worst experience I ever had. I hated it. But when Christmas came and I went home, I didn't go back. So then I had this cousin. His wife was needed some help. She just had a new baby. So they asked me if I would come down and help her out a little bit. So I went to Hampton and helped her. I just stayed about a month, and then I had a call from Roses 5 and 10 to work in the office. So I left that other job because it was just about over anyway. And I went to Roses and worked in the office, made payrolls and things like that. Then I got a job. Belk's opened in Hampton. And they would give more money for doing the same thing. So I left and went there.
Do you remember how much money it was that you made in those days?
Yeah, I do. I worked 8 hours a day, 4.5 days, and started at $19 a week. Then it went up to $25 a week. And that's it. But then I got a job at NASA. I had an engineer friend that worked at NASA. He and his wife were my good friends. And one Sunday he came to me at church and he said, "Phil, you ought to go out to NASA and apply because they're hiring." Because he was a boss, so he knew. So I went out and applied, got a job that afternoon. I went there and they said, "Where did you go to school?" I said, "Unionville High School." "Well, who were your teachers?" This guy was interviewing me. And I said, well, it was when Elizabeth Thrift and Frances Horton from Roanoke taught me down here at Unionville. And they said, "You got math under those two teachers?" He says, "Oh, I know them, and I know you know what you're doing if you took math under those two teachers." And I said, "That's the most ironic thing I ever had to do in my life."
That's amazing.
It is.
Your interviewer knew your teachers?
He knew my teachers.
And knew their reputation?
And knew them. He lived in Roanoke, but he was working at NASA. And they lived in Roanoke, and he knew them, and he knew when they taught me too. So he said, if you took math under those two teachers, you're qualified for the job. So that's how I got my job. I didn't have college, so I couldn't become a mathematician. But I did work for my division chief for 5 years. We had a lot going on. We had the astronauts there. We worked for, did math equations and stuff for them. They did tests. We had a wind tunnel, and that started it out. And then all these companies would bring in their models, put them in the tunnel, and then they ran the tunnel and got figures, and we had to solve the equations. But my boss took me for his equations. I mean, he was the boss of the division, but he was also doing his own projects for aeronautics. And so he got me to work for him. And I solved a lot of problems. When they did the test, it went to another building and got reams of paper to come back with answers on it. And we had to solve 3 equations to make sure that machine was right. And we found out many times that they jumped and skipped and everything, and we found problems with it. So we did that for a long time to make sure that the machine didn't skip a line or something. But I liked the work. We were computers.
Yeah.
About 5'1".
Right. No, that's what it started out to be. We were computers.
Right.
And then they got the computers, and they had to change our name. So
You were called computers?
Yes, we were. Mm-hmm. We did everything a computer did. Then they got the computers, and we were mathematical technicians. But I didn't have college, but I had a lot of math. So he bought toothpaste 2 days in a row. And he had an excuse to come back the next day because he dropped it on the floor, and he had to get some more. So then finally, I think it was one day I was working the candy. See, my office was upstairs. And one day I was working in the candy for somebody that had gone to lunch. And he came in and bought some candy. And then he walked around in the store, and he came back and he talked to me for a little bit. And he said, what are you doing Sunday? I said, I'm not sure, because I don't know what I want to do Sunday. He said, well, if you would like to do something special, how about a date? So we dated, never stopped dating. He was just a nice guy. Very, very nice. Very sweet guy. But he had aplastic anemia. passed away too soon. But we had a lot in common. We liked to do the same things, and he loved to dance, and so did I. So we went to every dance we could find almost. Oh, and I won a trophy. I had a tumor, and I went to the doctor, and he sent me that very night to the hospital to be operated on because it had consumed my whole stomach. And he said strangulation would be next. So I was operated on and didn't know much the first day, but the second day I was all alert. I knew what I was doing. He got me up and walked me. So I got over it. But that was close. And this girlfriend that graduated from high school with me. So we got together and we toured the whole United States on the bus. Had a great time. I've been everywhere. Every place in the United States that's anything at all. And I saw those presidents, and well, I've been everywhere. There's just no spot I haven't been. And Nova Scotia. So they put that in on my last trip because most people had been everywhere else. But I enjoyed it because I'm a traveler from way back. My parents used to kid me that every time the car doors opened, I was in it. At church, they always looked for my dishes or whatever I could.
And so what are some of your favorite dishes?
Oh, well, it's just the normal things like macaroni and cheese and fried chicken and corn pudding. But I learned a lot of recipes from my grandmother and my mom, and turkey on Thanksgiving. And then at Christmas time, we always had our dinner at home, but the next day we always went to Granny's house. I've had a good life. I can't complain. I had good parents. I had good brothers and sisters when we didn't fight. I mean, we didn't fight that much because my daddy didn't allow it. But we get mad at each other. But we had a good time as a family. And we always enjoyed being together.